Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have back with us John Badalamenti, who's the founder and CEO of Safe Estate, and we'll be talking about running out of income, the domino effect. John, welcome back to the program.
Thanks so much, Mike. I appreciate you having me back.
I think that if you were to run a survey to people, some of the biggest fears in life is fear of speaking in public and fear of heights and things. But one of the biggest fears too is running out of money in retirement. And I think that's not just a funny statement. It's actually a documented research stat. So talk a little bit about the concept of why it's so important for your clients to really dial into the concept of you need to make sure you will not run out of money in retirement.
Absolutely. We just actually believe that subject just came up. I teach many classes at a lot of the colleges through several states, and that subject always comes up. And I actually present it to the class and ask the question and say, what is your biggest concern or worry as you enter, as a retiree, as you enter into retirement? And I always hear it about 4 or 5 different ways. And it just happened in the class I just taught in Ann Arbor, Michigan, as I asked that very question right away. It's running out of money, outliving my income. We hear it put so many different ways, but it means the same thing. And it is a legitimate fear because, people are living longer today. Baby boomers, especially, people are much healthier, and they're very, very concerned about that, as I am, as what we speak in our class is all about.
That's a really big point, and we'll start unpacking that. But I know that for decades, that's been a big concern. But then when you factor in the realization that we as humans are actually taking better care of ourselves and eating better and healthcare and prescription medications are better, the tables are showing that life expectancy is longer than it used to be back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. So that becomes now an even more amplified fear, because if you didn't think that you would have enough money back when the life expectancy was whatever age, well, now it really could be a thing. So you talk about the domino effect. What's that first domino that typically falls when someone's retirement plan isn't properly structured?
Well, the funny thing is, if they don't plan ahead of time, as we always like to help everybody prep before retirement, as you enter retirement, you should already have that set up. But now that people are in retirement and they start to draw their funds out of whatever resources they may have, IRAs, 401k, old 401ks, things like that, this domino effect can come swooping in, we call it. I like to spell that out sometimes and actually draw it out on the board in a lot of my presentations. Whereas you're drawing money out, there are a lot of other factors that you can't control. You can control what you draw out. Let's say your Social Security as one of your main staples of retirement that you turn on, somebody turns it on at 62 and they're getting $2,000 a month. And that's something that they hope is going to last forever. That's another subject that we always talk about, running out of Social Security. But that's one bucket of money that's producing income. And if they go to the retirement plans and start drawing out, let's say another $2,000, which gives them $4,000 a month, they have to be very concerned about what factors they can't control that are hitting that bucket. It starts the dominoes to fall, because as you draw the money out of your retirement bucket to supplement your Social Security, you have to think about what's happening with the market and the investments inside. What is happening when the tax man comes for his piece? You've got that silent partner, as we've talked about before. You've got inflation factored in there. All these things hammer away at that number as you're pulling it out of there. And it causes this problem, so that then the effect of running out of money can just exacerbate. You can be saying, am I going to make it to 95 years old with this money, or am I going to run out when I'm 85? So it's legitimate.
Yeah, that really is. And I think that too many times we as humans tend to ignore, and well, it won't happen to me until it does. So that's never, like if you have a cut on your finger, you better get it addressed because it could get worse. So how does ignoring this small mistake, right, cascade into even a bigger potential financial crisis?
Well, here, as we said, setting up ahead of time, right? It depends on where your investment buckets are at and your investments inside
Mm.
each of your accounts. Wall Street being a funny character that just likes to take whenever it wants to take and give when it wants to, we can't control that. So if that person is getting their Social Security, as I just stated, and they're drawing money out of that retirement account, if the markets start to tumble, let's use a realistic scenario. Let's go to 2008, right? We had the crumble in the fall of 2008. Let's say you were drawing that money out at that time and your accounts were getting hit 30, 40%, 50, some of them or more. While you're drawing that money out, if your account is dropping in value at such a large amount, and then you also have to draw out a larger amount or a gross because the tax man also is coming and taking his piece. All of a sudden, you can look at that bucket and say, I had $300,000 in there, but I drew out 24,000 this year. I lost another 100. That's 124. And I had to, cough up another, 10,000 to the tax man. All of a sudden, those buckets are getting hit exponentially.
Yeah.
And you can certainly run short quickly. And that's the concern.
And I think a lot of times mindset plays a really, really treacherous game because you start amplifying things that aren't there or minimizing things that should be there, that kind of thing. But what you just described is like, oops, I'm kind of behind the eight ball, so let me catch up. And then you start getting tempted to make decisions that could put you at higher risk and then have bigger losses. And then they start compounding the wrong direction, right?
Absolutely. Well, it's funny. We hear a lot of that in class. People put up their hands a lot and say, yeah, and that starts to happen. That's happened many times in the last, 20 years. We've had a couple really bad spells in the market and I lost a lot of money. And I was,
Yeah.
thinking to myself, what happens when I start to draw? And this happens during the process of me drawing. I'm actually in retirement. So you hear a lot of these other, I don't want to label anybody. Let's just call the players out there, or the advisors out there, whomever they may be, telling them, well, now we're going to have to do this to catch up, or you're going to
Yeah.
have to maybe get a little riskier, as you just said, Mike, right? Or put off your retirement by 3 or 4 years because we're down so much, we're going to have time to catch up. As like
Yeah.
any of us would know how long it's going to take to come back,
Right.
right? I mean, come on.
Right.
I mean, you lose 20%, you're having to make back 30 or so. You lose 40, you got to make back 80. And I'm sure I can talk a lot on that subject, the numbers itself,
Yeah.
so it's tough.
Because there's no guarantee of where you're going to put it, and it's almost like you're throwing darts at a dartboard blindfolded. So that becomes a zero sum game of just kind of stay steady plotting. And I think that too, the older we get, the more memory we have about the negative things like the market crashing. And whether it's a full on crash or just big, big dips, a lot of retirees tend to fear market crashing, but isn't the real danger of running out of money while they're still active? What are some of those mindset shifts that people should be keeping in mind to really move their thinking from accumulation to reliable income? Because there really is a shift between I got to grow my money to now I got to protect, preserve, and have a income stream, right?
Right. Well, there's this moment you have to figure out of, okay, I'm planning to retire, let's say at 62 and I'm 60. A lot of people aren't thinking, well, let me start the process now. I'll just wait until I'm 62 and I'm quitting, and then I'll do my rollovers or my movement, and I'll start to put the plan into effect then. It's better to put it in, as I'm sure most people have heard in many ways, put it in early, have it started ahead of time, because there's that shift when you have to pull the trigger at that moment and start saying, okay, I'm starting to take it now. What other factors, as I just said earlier, can affect me as I'm pulling it out? Will things come at me from under every rock? Yes, here comes the tax man. I'm being redundant saying it. Here comes inflation.
Yeah.
You have to worry about hedging for that. Here comes losses in the market, which I have no idea when they'll happen. Maybe you're in a rally. We've been in a rally mode like a maniac since about 2013, 14, as we came out of the bad spell of '08. And other than COVID, we've been rallying and we've been spoiled again. So people get
Yeah.
spoiled and say, well, this thing will just go forever, right? Well, that's what a lot of people were saying back when 2001 and 2008
Yeah.
finally hit, right? You've got to prep yourself for those things by taking some things off the table and shifting the risk so that you're prepared for it as you pull the trigger on retirement income.
You know, I'm certain that, protecting your income and shifting risk, those, air quotes, you can ask 10 advisors and get 14 opinions. I know that there's different approaches, but I think that the main thing that people need to realize is at some point, we got to take our wins off the table because we don't know what the future holds. And secondly, we don't have enough runway if you wait till age 62 and you're going to retire in a handful of years, we don't have the runway if you take some losses to catch back up. When
Right? You've
do
got
you recommend that kind of, not just the mindset change, but when should you realize that a change needs to be made to go more protected? And then when do you start making those changes?
Yeah, it's a mindset. I mean, we have a shorter time horizon, as you just said, as we get closer to that time when we're going to click that retirement on, or age 62 or whatever it is. And I always recommend to start planning well ahead of time. I mean, as you know, I mean, I have a book coming out several months up the road that's going to speak very much about what we're talking about now, and there's going to be a lot of great ideas in there. But it's hard. There was a book that came out many years ago called "Who Moved My Cheese." I'm sure you've
Yeah.
heard of it. I know many people in my
Yep.
classes say, "Oh, I read that." It's the toughest thing in the world to actually institute change. You know, you have to make a
Yeah.
change just before retiring, but it's hard to pull the trigger and actually do it, just like in that book we just spoke about. So you have to set down some goals, and it's best to sit down with somebody because they can remove the emotions of it and help you lay a plan out effectively just before you retire. So I always say maybe
Yeah.
at least within a couple of years before you pull that trigger, you should have your game plan going into effect. So you're ahead of the game.
Yep, 100%. And then you feel like you're not making rash decisions. It's like the old saying, don't go grocery shopping when you haven't eaten all day because you're just going to grab anything off the shelf because it looks really good. You're hungry. So you don't want to make rash decisions. You want to make these calculated decisions well ahead of time to go, okay, when the time comes, here's this move I'm going to put into place. And you mentioned a few things that I think raise a really flag of frustration, I'll call it, because they're things that we cannot control. Taxes, inflation, healthcare costs. We just sit back and watch it happening to us. What are some of those kind of dominoes that you call them, and how can we address them when we have nothing to do about how they are going to change?
Well, the first thing that you can do is realize that they're real and they're going to happen at some moment and believe
Yeah.
it. If you believe that they're real and they've hit, and if you can just look back in time and say, well, look, it hit here, so there's going to be inevitable that those are going to come. Inflation is always there. We saw it spike up several years ago around COVID up to as high as 9%. Now it has been coming back down. Things are getting better, but we have no idea what can happen with our purchasing power. Also, we have zero control on if the market is going to fall apart tomorrow or 4 more years from now, and we'll continue to rally for the next 4 years. So you prep ahead of time. You start to do what we call shifting. We use like a series of colors, like Crayola crayons. And we say you just need to start shifting now a couple of years before retirement and removing some of the risk and making things more tax efficient ahead of the game. And that just requires actually just making subtle changes. It doesn't take, I guess moving out of risk is a lot easier than moving out of the tax man's way. That has to be
Yeah.
carefully planned in stages. But if you can do it ahead of time, there will be a lot more, I should say, excuse me, left in your pocket when you start to take it out rather than inflation, taxes, and market risk taking it away from you so that you do run out in a shorter amount of time.
And I think I'm a big reader, personal development person. So I love that you're weaving in mindset into all of this because it's not just only the numbers, right? But the thing that and you mentioned a book that, Who Moved My Cheese? I'll mention this book, The Compound Effect. Have you ever
Oh,
read that
yes,
one with Darren Hardy?
absolutely.
So
Yes.
it reminds me, the concept of that book is just do these little changes, 1% change here, 1% change there, because the compound effect is astronomical. So you don't need to make massive moves and massive changes. If you can just put this thing into place that adjusted just a little bit, and the cumulative effect is that you've got this tight, protected approach. Is that kind of some
Yes.
of the recommendations that you're making to your clients? They don't have to feel
Yes.
like, oh my word, I'm making a 180-degree shift.
No, and you can do it in stages. You can take your time and
Yeah.
do it over the couple of years before you retire, or just as you're coming toward the retirement. You're not doing this one whole jumping into a big hole all at one time.
Hmm.
You're doing it slowly, and you can see each piece being done so that you can slowly get to the plan that's laid out. And that's why it's good to sit down with somebody and take the emotions out of it, so that you don't have that compounding effect. Because as I said earlier, and I speak about this a lot in my classes. I always say take $100 and now you're ready to start drawing out of it. You're going to draw $2 out of it to retire on. And let's say the market falls apart and we get to that spell where it collapses on you right at retirement. And that $100 goes down 20%. Well, now you're down to $80. And I look at the class and say, just make that 20% back and you'll be okay. And a few people smile and go, wait a minute. And I go, aha, right? And we all start laughing. You make that 20% back on that $80
Oh, the
and you're
80.
only at 96.
Yeah.
Really? Okay. So you're not at, you went from 80 to 96, not all the way back to 100. You need to make back a heck of a lot more than what you lost. And it only compounds if you're losing 30 or 40 or God forbid 50%, which then you got
Yeah.
to make back 100%, which is quite a mountain to get over. You're going
Yeah.
to run out of time and your outliving your income is going to become real quickly.
Yeah. And I think that anyone would nod their head and go, yep, that makes sense to plan it well ahead. But there are always going to be a certain percentage of people that already get retired and realize that some of these dominoes are starting to wobble and topple. What are some of the steps that they can take to stabilize things if they don't have that runway well ahead of retirement because they've already retired?
Well, I always go back to emotions. The old trader, you quoted
Yeah.
a book, I quoted a book. The old trader Jesse Livermore said the emotions runs Wall Street. It's a market opinion is what matters, not ours.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to control your emotions. When things are on a tear like they've been, everybody just keeps thinking, well, I won't pull the trigger yet because I'm going to get a little bit more this week by Friday.
Yep.
It's hard to say, and you need to do this and say, when will I take the poker chips off the table? And when
Yeah.
will I cash out some of these profits? Because you can't lose what's not on the table, right? So you have to set up a happy medium. We usually do it with percentages. And we go to what amount do you want to protect or what amount do you not want to lose? And it's funny how so many people come up with a 50-50 effect right before they retire. They feel
Yeah.
happy starting out with building up to making 50% safe in whatever instruments you use that are completely safe and 50 that is still sitting and lingering in other investments like Wall Street investments that bear that risk so that you're eliminating a lot of the risk and balancing it out. You're taking money off the table and putting that aside. So that's your sure money for retirement.
Hmm. And it's often been said you can never go broke taking a profit. So you might move a
Absolutely.
little money out of a certain, sector in the market and put it into a safe place and then look backwards on the market and go, oh, it moved up a little bit. I guess I missed out on money, but it could have very easily have moved down dramatically and you'll never go broke locking in that profit and moving it to that safer
You
sector
got it.
or safer type of product. Yeah.
Numbers have changed through the years with a lot of things. We're hearing a lot now. We talk in my classes about the crossing effect of when should you take Social Security. You're hearing a
Hmm.
lot now that people should take it actually earlier, which goes against what they said before. And a lot of things have changed out there, and people are realizing they have this silent partner, and they need to start
Yeah.
balancing buckets now to get to the zero tax buckets as quick as they can, so they're keeping more of what they earned. And the market is very much that way too. We've learned. And I got a lot of engineers and people that show up in my classes that want to battle a lot with me, and I welcome it. I
Yeah.
say, bring the numbers next time. We'll laugh and talk about it and, prove me wrong. But we're now hearing a lot about the S&P and about how if you look at the S&P for over like the last 25 years or a 25-year period, and you look at how it's performed, just a couple main big hits can greatly affect the balance of your account and your income. Whereas if you would have had your money in, let's say, a 5% CD, which we can't really get now, but we could get around COVID time, and you would have gotten your 5% 25 times, It actually bested the S&P for the last 25 years because of those couple of hits that destroyed the numbers in the actual real return of the S&P 500. The
Mm.
stable fixed interest rate beat it out. It's almost hard to
Yep.
believe, but you can actually look at it and see it
Well,
happening.
and
Yeah.
you know, our wives probably roll our eyes when you and I or men start doing analogies, but what you just described is like the tortoise and the hare. You know, that steady plodding tends to win over the attempt to make those big, grand slam wins.
Yeah. And I'm not saying to run out and buy CDs. I'm in no way touting
Yeah.
certificates of deposit because now they're already down with a couple interest rate drops. But that should be a staple of your portfolio. I mean, a staple of your portfolio, excuse me. A piece of it should be of course, your cash, your money markets, some portions in CDs paying a steady income for a year and a half. And then you're breaking it up amongst other fixed and stable buckets that are safe. And then the other
Stable.
percentage that
Yeah.
you're leaving in Wall Street, you're leaving in Wall Street. That's
Yeah.
the riskier bucket.
Yeah. So I think when you can take the concept of success leaves clues, and when you go and look at people that are literally retired confidently, they're not worried about their money running out. They're not worried about volatility. These are people that have a calm demeanor regarding their retirement because they put the work in well ahead of time. And I love how you say, is it math, mindset, or management? Talk a little bit about that trifecta as it relates to people who are actually just calm about the retirement because they've made the right moves.
Yeah, it's tough to pull the trigger and make that
Yeah.
move to find the cheese, right? As we talk, but once they do it, they start to see it starts to show them. They actually can look at it and the paper starts to talk to them and say, I understand why I did this now. Because whenever there's any case of volatility for even a little blip, like recently, even last week, we had another little blip at the end of the week and we call it the volatility index, or the VIX kind of shot up real quick. It shows that emotions are getting a little nervous with the market. But these people that have already made the moves can actually look at that and say, oh, I notice how those stable buckets didn't get whacked or hit in any way. They stayed kind of like a flat line, right? They're doing good. But the other part of my retirement, the other buckets are doing like it's almost like a little, when you're in a hospital room and you're hooked to the machines and you got the little blips going up with your heartbeats,
Yeah.
right? Okay. That's what the market does. Whereas the flat line, and not that we're claiming anything with death or anything like that. But what I'm saying is that that flat, stable line is more of
Yeah.
your fixed end of it that protects you.
Yeah, for sure. Because there's always going to be some type of movement. We just don't want massive swings, and we don't want the swings downward. So I think that is so huge in having this mindset of never running out of income in retirement or money in retirement, and recognizing that certain dominoes, air quotes, can start toppling and really impact that negatively. So know what they are and address them well ahead of time. And if someone is interested, John, in having you look at what that could look like for them, just to provide some options, what's the best way that they can learn more and then also reach out and connect with you?
Anytime, we'd love you to come to one of our classes and learn all about it and talk with us, afterwards, of course. But the best way to do it is, you can type in or look up meetjohnb.com. That's MEET, John, JOHN, B as in boy.com, meetjohnb.com. And that'll take you to everything about me and where you can find where we're going to be, where we're teaching. And, we'd love to see you. Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, John, thank you so much for coming back on. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you again today.
Thanks so much, Mike. Appreciate you having me.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.